Gen Selects has been very quiet lately, with the contents of the line becoming more and more sparse every year. Guardian Robot aside, the only figures we got from the subline last year were a bunch of bog standard black repaints. So hearing about a G1 Season 1 Autobot multi-pack being in the works was quite exciting to me, and the more I heard, the more intrigued I was. First hearing the lineup of the pack, and the Hound would be the as of yet unreleased Earth mode version leaked ages ago, and seeing the leaked images showing us the lack of clear plastic. But now that I have it in hand, I can confidently say that I am very happy to own the Generation Selects Legacy United Autobots Stand United 5-pack. Shit, that's a long name. Right, I think we'll go from left to right with how they came packaged here and start off with Jazz, who is a reuse of the 86 mold, which I'm a big fan of. With the fantastic animation-inspired proportions, light blanket of sculpted detail, and the gorgeous head sculpt. And I'll admit, this deco does it a lot of justice compared to the original, with the striping on the chest being darker and extending further up. The metallics on the original have been replaced with a very nice glossy grey. There's some extra painted detail on the shins. The Autobot badge interestingly forgoes any kind of outline, a common feature among the figures of this pack, which looked a bit strange to me along with the lighter striping on the car fenders on the shins, but upon research that's 100% accurate to the cartoon model. The gun remains basically unchanged, still being plenty cartoon accurate and drenched in silver paint. I really like this accessory and it brings an awful lot to the poses this figure can hold. Articulation on this figure is good. It's lacking any kind of wrists, but the rest of the posing is nice and solid and the large feet give him a really steady base. But the joints here feel a lot tighter and more solid than the original 86 version, and the leg tabs hold better too. Transformation is quite intricate without being fiddly, and leaves you with a pretty good car mode, but it isn't perfect. The sculpt here is great overall. He has a lot of good details and he feels very complete, but the deco, while accurate, leaves a lot to be desired here. The striping looks a lot more cartoon accurate, but doesn't seem quite as vibrant as the original, nor does the lack of silver paint on the front grille. And the stripes on the rear fenders seem to have come at the cost of the white coverage on these two black lines. The biggest change here comes from the form of opaque windows on this figure, along with all the others in this set. It's not the greatest looking in this example, but I do appreciate it with this mod in particular, considering the 86's clear plastic having a tendency to break. While the alt mode has some imperfections, it's still not bad, and the solidity and vibrance of the robot mode here makes me quite happy to replace my original with this one. Sunstreaker here looks sublime. This is the only mold in the set that I haven't owned a version of in the past, and I'm quite a big fan of it. The sculpted detail here is exactly to my taste, with the large smooth surfaces punctuated with occasional points of greater detail like the shoulders and shins, and the proportions are fantastic. The head sculpt is immaculate, being quite the handsome devil, and it's punctuated nicely with these fantastic colours. I love the shades of yellow and grey on the go here. He's just so lush and vibrant, and the opaque plastic on the chest works a lot better than the clear from the original. In fact, all the colours here far exceed what I've seen on the original. Usually I'm not a fan of Hasbro's yellow plastic, but the one we're seeing here and on the chest of 86 Blaster 2 is so much nicer and livelier. Accessories here kick ass. He retains the intakes from the Earthrise figure with a nice coat of silver, but also gains a blaster. The gun here is just a reuse of Legacy Elite 1's guns, but in flat grey. It doesn't work too badly as a version of his pistol from the cartoon. Articulation here is fantastic, with great ranges all round, plus a little extra at the feet and shoulders, and all his joints are nice and solid. The transformation is pretty fun, with the rotation that closes up the two halves being extremely satisfying for some reason, and the vehicle mode is really great. The dynamic shapes and smooth surfaces on this figure really do well to invoke the aesthetics of the Countach. The windshield does sometimes struggle to tab in nicely, but that isn't a huge issue, and the rest of this mode holds together really well, and the colours, especially the placement of the grey portions, are gorgeous. I'm really happy with this guy, and finally having a Sunstreaker to go alongside my Sideswipe feels great. This figure is a definite highlight of this set. Trailbreaker is the absolute best experience I've had with this mold. Both the previous versions I've owned have had pretty major tolerance issues with the joints and transformations, so a solid version of this helps me appreciate the fantastic sculpted detail on this guy even more. The torso and great head sculpt keep it simple, but then the limbs break out into an abundance of light panel lining which I don't mind at all. And the overhead gadgets and gizmos look pretty nice and bring this guy together. The proportions, however, are a little off, this mold being slightly better suited to Hoist than Trailbreaker's proportions. I don't really have a problem with that though. Personally, I think the guy looks great anyway. And that is helped by the fantastic colour scheme. Instead of the usual black that the character would be adorned with, this figure instead uses the same grey found on Sunstreaker for a much bolder look that pays far greater service to the details. Pair that with a lighter grey and saturated red and you get a rather lovely colour scheme. Accessories here work quite nicely. His hand blaster looks the part, but due to the limitations of it being an accessory it doesn't completely encompass the hand, and the backpack can detach to be used as a shield. Articulation is the main drawback of this guy. He isn't missing anything, but the stubby legs and large arm flaps make posing this guy a little bit odd. But that doesn't mean he can't pull off some dynamic poses. I love how involved the transformation on this mold is, and it feels great here, leaving us with a really nice looking truck mode. The main body of the truck looks very whole and clean, with some nice subtle detail work and a really nice front headlight array and grille section. The painted details work fantastically here, with painted tail lights and probably my favourite use of the opaque windows in this set. If you're not a fan of those opaque windows though, you can remove most of them, revealing this far more pickup truck-like form that definitely matches movie Ironhide's vibe and gives you access to the overhead weapons. I love how far it's raised off the ground by the huge wheels. This does raise an issue though, that being the underside kibble, which is visible from every side and really drags the figure down. Hell, the front wheels don't even touch the ground if you don't have the arms lined up right. The alt mode here isn't bad per se, but it does have some things holding it back from being great. The complete package of this guy does a great job and really scratches the itch for a good Trailbreaker in me, seeing as how he was one of my favourite Autobots as a kid. Wheeljack though unfortunately fumbles the bag. This figure uses the Earthrise mold, which already has some problems. The proportions aren't the best with the long forearms and strange shoulder placement, but at least the sculpted detail is okay, going a little lighter on the intricate details. The head sculpt is gorgeous, being one of the best in the set, but the deco on the go here is a bit of a mixed bag. The animation accurate colours do wonders for the vibrance of this mold in comparison to the Earthrise version, but on the other hand the cartoon accurate livery holds this guy back a little, especially on the back where it is immensely plain looking. And the squared off torso window isn't complemented by the opaque plastic at all. Accessories here are alright, with the shoulder cannon and back wings from the original still remaining and still picked out in silver, but with the addition of the other Elite 1 gun, which doesn't work as well here as it did on Sunstreaker unfortunately, thanks to the strange angle of the figure's forearms. And the posability isn't great either. The motion is similar to Sunstreaker, but is substantially more restricted by the sculpt, especially the arms, and the legs had a critical issue out the box. Upon unpacking this guy, I went to bend his hips to find them completely immobile. With a bit of pressure I was able to unfuse the right hip, but the left needed to be warmed up with a hairdryer and worked out with pliers for almost an hour before it would bend, which caused some damage to the inner hip joint, and because of this, the sideways movement at the left hip is not exceptionally tight. This also left the forward and backward movement of the hips so tight that I can feel the plastic bend and flex whenever I articulate them. The transformation on this guy is thankfully quite a lot of fun though, and leaves you with a very well sculpted car mode that is complete all round, but it's just not complemented by the painted details. This car mode just looks cheap from the lack of detail, especially compared to the original. The accents are so concentrated around the windshield that it genuinely looks like they ran out of budget on this guy, despite it being accurate. And I feel like the large amounts of colour breakup and the racing sponsors make the original car mode far more enjoyable, which is a shame because I prefer these colours. I don't know. Overall, Wheeljack is the weakest of the set. It's not awful in robot mode, but it has some real issues there, and the alt mode just looks far too plain, and I really wouldn't blame you if you toy hacks this guy up. Hound is a divisive one. On one hand, it's nice to finally have an Earth mode version of Siege Hound that is actually Hound, with him being quite a highly anticipated release. But on the other, people aren't exactly happy that you had to pay an extra 80 quid for him. But honestly, I'd say it's worth it, because Hound is my favourite figure of this set. The sculpted detail and proportions on this guy are gorgeous. He's not one-to-one to the cartoon model, but he is very close. And I much prefer the details on the go here to the original unit of measurement, especially with the new thinner legs that don't obstruct each other's motion anymore. The colour choices here are dead perfect, with two shades of green contrasting one another beautifully, and all the painted details like the patches of yellow and the details on the chest look sublime. And the head sculpt is great too, if a little gormless looking. Accessories here are rather lovely, with Hound's hologram projector being pretty accurately adapted, and the enormous shoulder rocket looking awesome and being drenched in green paint, which is excellently colour matched. Articulation here takes a huge bump too. There are great ranges on all the joints, but the notable changes from the Siege mold is the knees feeling an awful lot less restricted, and the ankles having a smooth arc of motion instead of the detented movement that they used to have. And all the joints are just buttery and smooth across the board. Transformation once again feels like an upgrade to me, with the same sequence of steps but no squishy back kibble to mash into place. And granted, without that, the back of the car sometimes struggles to hold together, but I do like the car mode a lot more. The surface details here really work to invoke a classic Jeep, and the huge wheels have such a vibe. I do wish the windshield was bigger, but it doesn't bug me too much. I really enjoy the suggestion of seats on the interior, and plugging the shoulder cannon into the back of the car mode ties it all together beautifully. Hound, I feel, captures the vibe of an animation accurate figure best out of this set, and his overall solidity and just how much it improves over the Siege version definitely wins it some brownie points. Overall, this box set was definitely worth the price. Considering that you're saving a few quid, depending on where you buy it from, having 4 great figures and 1 mediocre one is definitely worth it to me. And if you're looking for this selection of characters, or are looking to build a more animation inspired G1 display, then I think this set is your best bet. I definitely recommend it.